private coaching practice, I'm finding myself having the same conversation over and over again lately. And that's about how to set boundaries in the face of really manipulative people. I've been helping my clients understand all the different ways in which people can manipulate them, and more importantly, how to be aware of these tactics and what to do about them so that their boundaries remain intact. And since I've had this conversation over and over again, I thought it would be good to make a video detailing 7 of the most common ways in which people try to manipulate us, why those techniques work on us and how they work on us, and most importantly, what to do about them to defend against them. So if that's something that you think you might benefit from, stay tuned and watch today's video. Hey, my happy shiny puppies in training. This is Melody Fletcher, author of Deliberate Receiving. Finally, the universe makes some freaking sense. Today's video is all about manipulation and the different ways in which we manipulate each other. Now, why do we actually want to manipulate each other? Well, I'll give you the really short explanation here. The long explanation you can find in my book under the shame group. Because people who are manipulatable and people who are manipulative are actually two sides of the same coin. They are stuck in a place where they have to control others in some way or elicit a response from others in some way in order to feel safe or feel like they're worthy or feel like they contribute or feel like they're going to be okay. So while someone who's manipulatable, is trying to do service to others, trying to please others in order to get a few scraps of food or a few scraps of love or a few scraps of recognition, someone who's manipulative is getting that same recognition or that same sense of importance or that same sense of value, but they're doing it by controlling others. So if they can get you to do something for them that maybe you don't even want to do, if they can exercise this kind of control over you, then they must be important. Then you must really care about them. This is where if you care about me, you'll do this and this and this paradigm fits in. So that's really the nutshell explanation about why people manipulate each other, why they feel the need to do this at all. But while it would be nice if we could just go out there and stop everybody from manipulating, that's not realistic because, first of all, it's only an energetic response to the people who are asking to be manipulated, those who are manipulatable. But also, we can't really manifest in somebody else's reality. We can only manifest in our own. So we can't really go out there and stop people from doing something or from not doing something. We can try, but it doesn't really work, as we can see in the news today. All we can ever really do is own our power and change our own vibration so that we're no longer able to be manipulated. And we do that by understanding the different ways in which people try to manipulate us, by anticipating them often even, which we can do, and by knowing how to react against them. So that's what today's video is all about. I'm going to highlight the 7 biggest ways in which we manipulate each other that I've found, and some of these I've not really seen written about before in this way, so some of them will probably be familiar to you and some of them might be new to you. So if you have people in your life who are manipulating you, you might recognize these behaviors, but today I'm going to give you some ammunition about what to do about them. But I will warn you, these ways have to do with you changing your energy and not about going and bashing somebody's face in or knowing how to have the perfect comeback in the right moment. So let's get started. Now, a few weeks ago, I did a video on spiritual bypassing, and in that video, I mentioned the first technique I'm going to highlight here today and talk briefly about, and that is the technique of gaslighting somebody. You might have heard about this. When someone gaslights you, what they are doing is they are trying to convince you that your boundaries are ridiculous and invalid. So essentially, when something bothers you, maybe something that they've said or something that is inconvenient to them bothering you, and you mention that, or you try to react, or you try to enforce a boundary there, they will come at you and say that that's stupid, nobody else would ever react that way, it doesn't seem to bother anybody else, it wouldn't bother them, you're just being overly sensitive, or anything along those lines. And even spiritual people are not immune to this, because you'll find people telling you that if you were more enlightened, that wouldn't bother you, for example, which is just another version of the same thing. So in the gaslighting manipulation technique is basically to get you to lower your boundaries by convincing you or causing you to doubt the boundaries' validity, and by convincing you that your boundaries are stupid and invalid and you should just drop them. Here's the thing. What boundaries you have isn't up to anybody else, and nobody else gets to determine what boundaries you have. If something bothers you, it gets to bother you. Nobody else gets to tell you how you feel. So for example, if somebody's punching you in the arm over and over and over again, and you say, "Can you please stop punching me in the arm?" And then they go, "I'm not hitting you hard." Yeah? It's not up to them at which point the punching in the arm bothers you, or if it bothers you at all. It's only up to you. And when you enforce a boundary like this, you have to remember that you're fighting for the boundary and for the right to set boundaries, not for the boundary itself. So don't let them convince you that the boundary isn't big enough for you to make a stand over. It's disrespectful to step on somebody else's boundary. Now remember, there's a big difference between controlling somebody else, which means you don't get to be this way, and a boundary. You don't get to talk to me that way and continue to talk to me. Enforcing a boundary usually means that you're going to walk away from this person, you're going to stop engaging with this person. It is not about stopping other people from living their lives the way that they want to live their lives, taking away any kind of freedom from them that you would like to also exercise. It's simply about choosing to engage with people or not choosing to engage with people who are behaving a certain way or who don't respect your boundaries. So you don't get to come in my house and talk to me this way or poop all over the rug. But listen, if you want to do that in your own house, more power to you. I'm not going to come over. The second method of manipulation that I'd like to highlight is when somebody gets more upset or way angrier than you in an attempt to sort of squash your bit of an uprising of rebellious emotion. So you might be getting pissed off about something, and the person that you're talking to just explodes at you with rage. And there's so much drama, and it's so volatile, it's so big, that you just find yourself backing down in shock, because you might have been talking about something that was this big, and they just turned it into something that was this big, and you're just not willing to deal with that kind of drama. And oftentimes you will stop trying to defend your boundaries in an effort to avoid this rage or this huge blow up. So what they do is they come at you with an emotional response that is so giant that it just doesn't seem worth it for the thing that you're trying to defend. And so you back down, and oftentimes don't even try to stand up for yourself again, because you're absolutely not willing to go up against this rage machine. So again, I want to stress that when you're defending a boundary, a proper boundary, and how to set a proper boundary is a video onto itself. But when you are setting a proper boundary and you're defending that boundary, it doesn't really matter what it's about. It doesn't really matter if the other person considers it valid or not. Once you have clearly communicated a boundary and the other person, in other words, this is not what I will accept. That bothers me if you do that, and if you do that, I'm going to walk away from you. I'm not going to engage with you anymore. You don't get access to me anymore. Once you've done that, and that person crosses over that line, you have to defend it, or you don't have any kind of boundary, which means that you have to bring about the consequences. So you walk away from them, you withdraw from them, you say no, you get out of the deal, you do whatever you got to do that you said you would do if the boundary was broken. And again, I probably will make another video about how to actually properly set boundaries, boundaries that are not born of control issues, boundaries that are things that truly bother you, that are your true deal breakers, and boundaries that are defendable. The third manipulative tactic that I want to highlight is when people hijack the issue or the conversation and take it off on a tangent in an effort to distract you from the original topic, so that you never actually start to set that boundary or defend that boundary. So let's say that your significant other is late and they don't call you, and they're really late and now you're really worried and they didn't call, and they come home and you had no idea where they were and they just kind of blow it off like it's no big deal. And you want to communicate to them that actually really bothers you, and that you requesting them to call you, and that is important to you. And you have that conversation, but as you're having that conversation, they start talking about how stressed they are at work, and they're not just talking about it, they're really getting into a rant about it, and how you don't understand it, so now they're picking a fight with you. You don't understand how stressed they are at work, and you don't have any sympathy for them, and now you might find yourself on the defensive. No, I totally understand how stressed you are at work, and I'm sorry, and now you're maybe even apologizing to them. And it all started with you wanting to set a boundary, and now you're not actually talking about how, what bothered you. You're talking about what's bothering them, and they've hijacked the conversation and taken it into a different direction, where oftentimes, like I said, you're actually going to find yourself soothing them and apologizing to them, and oh, now you can't bother them with your little thing because poor thing over here. This is a manipulative tactic, and keep in mind, I really wanted to say here that most people who use manipulative tactics are not doing so in a conscious way. So your partner probably is not doing this on purpose. They're not hijacking the conversation on purpose, but they're doing it nonetheless. So when you notice that has happened, what you want to do is you want to take a break. Walk away from that conversation. There's no point in you trying to argue your way back to your original topic. Let it go for that moment. Put a pin in it. And then at the next opportunity, and I really mean the next opportunity, like the next morning when things are a little bit calmer, or the next evening at the latest, bring it up again. Bring it up calmly. And if the person tries to derail it again, simply say, I'm not going to let you derail this conversation from something that's important to me. And if they don't accept that, walk away. You can come back to it again. You're going to have this conversation. Now, obviously, if you're with a partner who's never willing to have that conversation, you need to maybe get out of that relationship. Yeah? But you want to be able to have that conversation. Do not let them derail you. But you don't have to have that conversation with them when they're upset. Now, if you're in a relationship where maybe they're always upset, again, you might want to rethink that relationship. Manipulative tactic number 4 is giving people ultimatums. When somebody gives you an ultimatum, either do this or else, or do this now, or you're not going to get to make the decision at all. It is always, always, always a manipulative tactic designed to get you to make a decision that is not in your best interest. So here's a clever little trick that I learned years ago while I was still working in the corporate world. When somebody gave me an ultimatum, my answer was automatically no. Just shot right out of me. Well, you need to do this today. Well, then no. I would ask for time if I wasn't sure if it was a yes or a no. I need a few days to think this over to see how it's going to fit in. Well, you have to make this decision now. Well, then it's a no. You'd be really surprised how quickly people backpedal and give you more time or allow you to see more options, because what they're doing in that moment is also closely related to manipulative tactic number 5, which is they try to artificially narrow your options to make it look like you have to choose between option A and option B. And they'll often use this in conjunction with this time pressure and this ultimatum to hopefully put so much pressure on you that you won't think clearly and question whether or not these really are the only two options. If you had some time and some space to breathe and think, you might question them and realize that there are more options that will probably be much more beneficial for you. This is a tactic that is sometimes used unconsciously, but is actually often used consciously by salespeople, by people negotiating professionally. Because it's designed to essentially pressure you and confuse you and lead you to make a certain choice. So is it going to be A or is it going to be B? And now you're thinking, I have to choose between A and B, when really there is always another option, such as none of the above, or option C, or something completely different that isn't on the table, that maybe isn't such a great deal for them, doesn't cost as much money, or is more beneficial to you. Remember that in real negotiation, in real, compromise, you're not looking for capitulation. You're not looking to beat somebody. You're not looking for a win-lose, a win over a lose. You're looking for the win-win situation. So hopefully you're not doing business or living a life with manipulative people, but these things do come up. So if somebody is trying to narrow your options, in that moment, it's usually best to walk away, to buy yourself some time, or to walk away from it completely. So if a car dealer is trying to pressure you into buying, do you want this car or that car? Which is it going to be, this car or that car? Come on, you have to make the decision now because both of them have other buyers on them. This car or that car, this car or that car. And you find yourself going, I don't know. Stop, walk away. Get yourself some breathing room. Chances are very good if somebody's doing that neither option A nor option B is going to be the best option for you. Because if it was, nobody would have to manipulate you into it. So go with how you feel. If in the moment you're feeling stressed, you're feeling pressured, always put a stop to it. And remember, and this is the key to this technique, remember that you can always put a stop to it. You can always walk away. You are never trapped, even though in that moment you may feel like it. Remind yourself that you are not, and get out of the situation. Just say no, and you'll be amazed at how quickly they suddenly find a little bit more time for you to breathe. Manipulative tactic number 6 is when people try to enforce contracts with you that you never actually agreed to. Now, what do I mean by that? Am I talking about legal contracts? No, I'm not talking about legal contracts. I'm talking about social contracts. I'm talking about invisible contracts, pseudo contracts. I'm talking about when people do something for you that maybe you didn't even ask them to do, and then they tack on a rider to that agreement, the agreement being, I'm going to do this for you. And they tack on an invisible rider that says, and now you owe me a favor, which I can collect at a future time. So when they come to you at a future time, they subtly or not so subtly imply or guilt you into capitulating and giving them what they want, even if you don't want to give it to them, because, well, they did this thing for you and you entered a contract. Well, the thing is, no, you didn't. You didn't enter any contract. So if I want you to do something for me, I can damn well ask you to do it and give you a chance to say yes or no. By me doing something for you, I do not have the right to tack on an invisible rider that now says you automatically owe me. If I want that to be the deal, then I can put that deal forth. I can put it on the table and say, okay, I will do this for you, but you owe me a favor. And now you can agree to those terms or not. Now, there's a reason why I'm putting it in such legalese, why I'm putting it into the language of contracts, because we understand, most of us understand a little bit about contract law. We understand legal agreements. We understand that in a contract, a legal contract, we go ahead and we spell out the agreement, and if it isn't in the contract, then it isn't valid. And so if you start to see your contracts with people this way, in other words, if you wanted to ask me for something, you should have asked me for it. Don't just assume I'm going to do it because you entered me into a contract that I never agreed to and therefore do not have to honor. Yeah? So that doesn't mean that you can't do things for other people. What I'm talking about is when people try to manipulate you into doing something that you don't want to do. There's nothing wrong with asking people for help, and there's nothing wrong with offering your help. But understand that if you offer your help, you do not now have a right to expect something in return unless you put that on the table. And I understand that to many people, these kinds of contracts are simply implied. And we do have a tendency towards reciprocity, which means that if you do something for me, it is much more likely that I will go ahead and do something for you. And that's all true. But be that as it may, that only applies, or should only apply in a healthy environment, to things that you actually want to do. If you have done something for me, I'm much more likely to be favorably disposed to you. So if we're talking about survival tactics of working together in a tribe so that we can all survive together, that works really well. In today's society, we're very often not talking about survival tactics. And so when we're using this force of reciprocity, this tendency towards reciprocity, we're usually using it in a manipulative way. So be on the lookout for people trying to guilt you into doing something that you don't want to do, that you never agreed to do, because of something that they've done for you and now you owe them. If you never agreed to that contract, you don't have to honor it. And by thinking of it in terms of a legal agreement, that will very, very often help you to overcome the guilt that you may be feeling at not doing everything you can and sacrificing yourself to the last extent for this person. Also remember that you're not doing a person any favors by allowing them to continue to manipulate you. They can learn to use their words. They can learn to ask for what they want and ask for what they need, giving you a chance, yes, to say no, but also giving you a chance to say yes, which means now you're actually in agreement. You're actually going to do it for them because you want to, not because you have to, which means that the whole thing feels so much better, so much lighter. And if you don't want to do it, they can ask somebody else, because there'll be somebody else who will be a match to that, providing they're ready to manifest the help in. But in order for them to go down that road and get to that part of their journey, first, people have to stop putting up with their manipulative behavior. So you're not hurting somebody by not allowing them to manipulate you. You're actually ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, doing them a favor by stepping out of this paradigm. You're certainly doing yourself a huge favor. Now, again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't help others or assist others with things. I'm saying don't allow yourself to be manipulated into something that you don't really want to do and that you never actually agreed to. Manipulative tactic number 7 is when people play to an identity that you've adopted or that you would like to adopt and use it against you. Now, the reason why we choose identities is a whole other video altogether. But an identity is a role that we would like to embody or that we have decided that we embody. And it's essentially like sticking yourself into a box and putting a label on yourself. And something that you now use as a way to measure if you're doing a good job or not, and as a way to know how to act and react in certain situations, in any given situation. So, for example, an identity might be to be a good hard worker, a good employee, a good girl, a good boy, a good wife, good husband, a good father, a good mother. And I know I'm using the word good here a lot, but that's because it shows up so frequently in people's identities. I'm a good person. And good in so many times in this context actually means compliant. I am a compliant daughter. I'm a good goddaughter. I'm a good little girl. I do what my parents tell me to do. I do what my teachers tell me to do. I do what my employer tells me to do. And now I can expect to be approved of. Now I'm all right. That would be that good little girl, that good person. That would be an identity role that we have taken on that is quite limiting to us because our real identities cannot be put into boxes. They're quite fluid, but that we use in order to feel safe, in order to know what to do in any given situation. Because if I'm a good girl and I get into a situation and I don't know what to do, all I have to do is sort of look up in the good girl handbook what a good girl would do in the situation, and then I just have to do that, and then I can't really get it wrong, and I'm not going to get yelled at by any authority figure. So in a real nutshell, that's a tiny overview of identities and how they work. So if somebody knows that you think of yourself in a certain way, and oftentimes this will be somebody who's close to you, a family member, or your parish priest, for example, or your boss, or somebody who's a really good friend, or a close friend, I should say, if they know the identity that you have adopted, they can use this identity against you. So, for example, if I know that you think of yourself as a good person, and I know what that means to you, meaning that maybe you're virtuous or maybe you're just really helpful. A good person is helpful. Therefore, if I'm a good person, I am helpful. Then I can play on that and get you to help me, even if you don't want to, and even if it's something that's totally arbitrary. I could have easily asked anybody else, but now you're going to do it because as a good person, you kind of have to. And this is where identities become really manipulative and really limiting, because it isn't so bad to have some kind of set of guidelines on how you want to react in certain situations. It's when you start to have to behave that way because the identity says that you do, and that's who you are, even though inside that is not how you feel at all. So now you're overriding how you feel and how your true self wants to react in order to react the way that this character you're playing, this identity, should react. And people can use that to manipulate you. So the way out of that is to start to drop your identities, to start to drop your masks, to start to live more in the moment, to be conscious, to be aware, and to listen to your inner voice and see, what is it that I really want in this moment? What is it that I really want to do? Which option actually feels really good to me? To, again, not honor social contracts that you never actually agreed to, if it's something that you don't want to do, and to have that conversation to teach people how to treat you and enforce those boundaries. And if they don't, walk away. Don't continue the relationship with somebody who will not respect your boundaries. So I hope these 7 ways have given you a new outlook on how people can manipulate you. Remember that when you very first start to set boundaries, people are going to lose their shit. They're going to throw tantrums, and they're going to throw all of these tactics and more at you in an attempt to sort of bully you back into submission. So the best thing that you can do in that moment is to just, again, walk away, give them their space, and look at them like they're a 2-year-old having a tantrum. Don't try to argue with them in that moment. Let them have their tantrums. Generally, they're going to tantrum themselves out at some point. They're going to run out of steam, and only after that has happened should you have any kind of conversation. So I will be making more videos about how to set boundaries, how to set proper boundaries, how to defend boundaries, since it's such a huge topic that I talk about a lot. But for this week, I have been Melody Fletcher, author of Deliberate Receiving. Finally, the universe makes some freaking sense. And if you're watching this anywhere but on my blog, then please come by to deliberatereceiving.com, hit the blog button, and join the conversation. Meet the happy, shiny puppy army, my tribe of amazing, powerful, like-minded creators who cannot wait to meet you. And until next week, thank you for bringing your light to the world. Bye!